And we are back here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket, online at WTK.com. Ira Weintraub now in the air chair. Sam did have a family theme that popped up about an hour and 10 or so, hour 20 minutes ago. He will be hopefully back in the air chair tomorrow. We'll stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, it is time for the MGoBlog Roundtable. Brian Cook is here. Seth Fisher is here. Craig Ross is here. Fellas, how are you this morning?
Good. I'm fine.
All right, well, let's get into it. Go ahead, Seth.
No, I'm terrible. we had a major plumbing issue this morning. So
I was about to say, how could you be bad Michigan State week, but a plumbing issue in the house will definitely do that.
That's why I look disgusting right now. I feel disgusting.
Yeah, the joys of home ownership will not be a topic on the show this morning here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK the ticket. You have a good bye weekend other than that, apparently?
I did. I went to San Antonio with my family. There's blessedly nothing to do there but walk along a river. So that's what we did. We walked along a river and ate food.
Sounds like a good time. Barbecue? Yeah. Or Tex-Mex? Or
yes. Yes.
Yes. All the major food groups in San Antonio. All right. Craig, good bye week?
Yeah, it's been a strange week for me with strange events. But I'll leave it at that.
What it sounds like is everybody's ready for a football game this Saturday. You guys
I am definitely
ready for a game this Saturday. All right, we'll jump right into Michigan State as the game is coming up. It's been obviously over a week now since Michigan played a game. The bye week, their quote-unquote improvement week. Us as fans, a chance to recharge and get ready for the next one and really leave 2 weeks of smack talk, which might be too long, I think, between these games. Seth, you were starting to say nice things about Michigan State on social media. I was having a hard time with that. Any particular reason you decided to say nice things about MSU this week?
Hey, listen, people are dogging the education at Michigan State, and I have a lot of people I know who went to Michigan State. So that's
not a point in Michigan State's favor, Seth. I mean, just because you know people that went there doesn't mean that.
I think I was responding to I was going historical is what was going on, right? Because talking about where's Michigan State come from, and it's this period after the World War II where the GI Bill created an opportunity for a lot more people to go to college, and Michigan State saw an opportunity there to grow. So they just stacked kids into a dorm until they had enough money to build another dorm and continue that process until they were a world-class university. And I think it's a really cool story, and it's an important story that people should know about if you're interested in higher education at all. So,
but you made a very important point that you can still troll their fan base, their obnoxious basketball coach, and some other things. And that's what we're here to talk about. Not that side that you just talked about, the nice stuff. We're here to talk about the other stuff.
And we could also talk about their football team specifically.
Yeah. Well, Sam isn't here to trash talk, and I'm not much of a trash talker, but as I was thinking about it, I decided that Michigan State is the sort of Tom Bombadil of the Big Ten when it comes to football. A team that doesn't advance the narrative at all. That's as nasty as I can get. Otherwise, I'm with Seth on this, on this one.
All right, guys, let's get into the game. I guess I like to jump in what concerns you the most. So, Brian, I'll start with you. When you head in, you look at Michigan State. We'll start with Michigan on the offensive side. What concerns you the most when they have the ball? What can Michigan State try to do to limit what Michigan's been so good at doing, in particular the running game?
What concerns me most is 1st and goal from the 1.
It's disrespect to 4th and 6.
No, it's no. Like when Michigan's got the ball, the biggest problem they're going to have is when they have it at the 1 yard line. Are they going to be able to score a touchdown? Because that's the only thing Michigan State is good at this year. They stoned Washington twice. They stoned someone else twice. They bow up when they get down to the 1. They're like, no more tomfoolery. We're gonna play defense now, and by God, they do it.
Isn't that they say the field shortens when you get closer? There's a little less room to guard.
Well, yeah, but that's that's where they're good. Once you get down to their 1 yard line, they're like, okay, we draw the line here. So the idea is to not do that. It's to score from 62 yards or 67 or 69. Nice.
93 was cool.
Yeah.
I like that one.
I mean, if you look at Michigan State this year, I mean, they started against Akron, who is probably maybe the worst team in the country, certainly the worst team in the MAC. And and then they had a game against against Western that was actually a really pretty even game going into the fourth quarter. Then they got crushed by Washington. They gave up I don't know, 500 plus yards. Then Minnesota gained 508 yards against them, and they got beaten up, I think 34-7 there. Then they got beaten pretty badly by Maryland. They got completely crushed by Ohio State, and the score of 49-20 doesn't reflect 620 yards to 200 yards. And then all of a sudden, last week against Wisconsin, they played Wisconsin fairly evenly. In fact, it was a very even game, but at the end, they did kind of look like the better team. And so, and in the Wisconsin game, they have their safety back who's been out for much, if not all the year.
Xavier Henderson.
And they have their defensive tackle back.
Jacob Slade.
Yeah, whom is probably just about as good as any defensive lineman in the Big Ten. So, and they did play. I know that Wisconsin is a disaster, but they did look like a better team this past week than what they've been overall the year. Am I making too much of this, or do I have to look at the big data points?
I mean, you have to look at their secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Because
they're bad.
They are terrible at pass defense. And what happened with Wisconsin? Graham Mertz could not throw the ball within a zip code of any of his receivers, except for Chimere DK. Every single time they throw at that guy, they score. So they only do it once per week. But like that was the entire game. Like Michigan State, if you let their secondary off the hook, and I keep on checking the weather just in case it's going to change, but I think it's going to be like 59 degrees and partly cloudy. So, unless that changes or we just have, a sudden breakdown in the ability to pass, that's the story. They got back some of their guys. They changed some things around. They were using Jacoby Windman, who's that UNLV transfer. They were using him at defensive end because they didn't have an extra second defensive end. They think they found one in true freshman Zion Young, which allowed them to move Windman back to linebacker, which is where he's better, which allowed them to take Ben Van Sumeren, who we all know and love, off the field, which made them better against the run on a down-to-down basis. And I think that was the difference against Wisconsin. But Wisconsin can't throw the ball, and all you have to do against Michigan State is throw the ball.
I don't think a mid-season shift of a guy from defensive end to linebacker is really a sign that you're turning the corner, right? Like, yeah, they made a couple of changes and they played a butt offense and they managed to get to overtime and win that game against a butt offense that got their coach fired mid-season. Wisconsin's coach got fired mid-season because their offense was so terrible. So what does that really mean? It really means that Wisconsin is that bad. Because every other game Michigan State has played, they have looked like not a team that's bad, but a team that's very bad. And so you have a more than 3-score spread in this one. It's like 22.5. I mean, you take the points all day, right? But in terms of like, is this team really a threat? I mean, no, they're a threat to cover in the fourth quarter. But like, this team is bad. It is bad. It is a bad team doing bad things. Like they lose Walker, who should have won 4 Heismans last year, and they're averaging like 2 yards a carry against Power 5 teams, and that's like generous. I mean, their 2 running backs are total doofs, and their offensive line can't block anybody. Peyton Thorne's all right. Jaden Reed's all right. I mean, but they can't string together drives, and they have the worst secondary in the Big Ten, possibly in America. And just because Graham Mertz couldn't burn him up, like what is JJ McCarthy going to do against the secondary? He's going to dissect it. And it took a huge confluence of flukes last year for Michigan to lose to a much better Michigan State team than this. I mean, it's going to be annoying because Michigan State's going to come out and that's their Super Bowl and all that stuff. But, Michigan hasn't really had a whole lot of competitive games. And this is a circled game, and they just came off a bye. So I think that sort of like comparative preparation advantage that Michigan State historically has is probably not going to be very prominent this year, just because of the circumstances of both teams' seasons. Because Michigan State hasn't had a whole lot of time to put together like their July drive, because they don't know what they're doing down on either side of the ball. So they're really in rescue mode. And then Michigan hasn't really been challenged. So they got a lot of stuff back in their bag. So I think you're going to see Michigan come out and put some new stuff on Michigan State. I think the Michigan State drive that everybody's like, oh, well, they did that in the summer is not going to be really there. So Michigan's going to like fumble 16 times. And there's going to be crazy holding calls that are from Mars. And the officials are going to watch the Michigan State offensive lineman bear hug Michigan State defensive lineman and think, oh, that's sweet. And it's still not going to matter. It's still not going to matter.
So the biggest problem with Michigan State is that they're annoying.
Well,
kind of like Tom Bombadil.
Well, I think what Brian's saying is if they were any other team, like a team that wears, from Bloomington or Piscataway, they weren't the team from East Lansing and Green and White.
Right.
The conversations this week would probably be a little bit different.
Right. And the thing is that there have been Michigan State teams that have been mediocre, that have been not very good, that have been meh. And Michigan has struggled with those teams. Like, I think over the past 20 years or something, if Michigan has a 1 to 10 point advantage in the SP Plus rankings, that's a coin flip. And that's why this game has been so frustrating for Michigan over the past 15 years. But this isn't a team that's ranked, 25th in these ranking systems. Michigan State is 52nd. They are 1 spot behind Troy, 2 spots behind Tulane, and 4 spots behind Marshall. Like this is a team that, if you look at the advanced numbers, is 20 points adrift of Michigan. And so the level of like alarm that you come into this game with has got to be related to how the teams have been playing. And kudos to Michigan State over the past 15 years. If you're coming into this game and you're a slight favorite, well, it's time to worry. But this isn't a slight favorite kind of deal. This is Michigan is one of the best teams in the country, and Michigan State is essentially a MAC team with a couple of nice transfers.
Yeah, I mean, when I run my yards per pass attempt numbers, I get Michigan being 23.5 points better, not counting home field advantage. And that's even bigger than the line, which I think is 21. Nevertheless, I have to admit, I feel anxious because stuff seems to happen in this game. Don't ask me why, but stuff happens. Now, maybe you're right.
That's all Michigan State is, though. That's the point. I mean, this is a lot like the 2018 game, where like before the Michigan State game in 2018, if anyone can remember how you were feeling at that point, you're like, oh no, last time we faced them, it was in the rain, and like that shut down our passing, and that was Michigan with if Michigan's a 2017 level team or 2020 level team, and they face this Michigan State team, the weird stuff that happens with Michigan State, that's what Michigan State is great at, is the weird stuff, right? They stop you on 4th and goal on the 1. They throw 4th and 6 lobs that land perfectly in Jaden Reed's hands. That guy, by the way, more than just okay, he's a good receiver.
He's fine.
Peyton Thorne is good at lobbing the ball up to him.
But
you're not talking about Braylon Edwards.
They're not moving the ball with him. Like his return didn't really change anything for them. And Michigan State is one of the worst special teams outfits in America, despite having by far the best punter in the country. They're 129th in field goal efficiency. They are one of the worst kicking teams in the country, and everything else they do on special teams is terrible. So the kind of things that pop up from time to time against Michigan State, those have fallen apart. The whole team kind of looks like you hired a guy who had one season at Colorado, went 5-7, and then lucked into the Doak Walker winner, who was a backup at Wake Forest and wanted out. And then he's gone. I mean, this is what the team is, right? They bring in a bunch of transfers, and you got lucky one year, but there's a reason those guys are transferring, right? There's a reason.
So we
That
question:
punter, by the
Tuck
way,
is
is a
coming. When will
transfer
he
as well.
arrive? It's a great question. If Tuck is coming, when will he arrive?
Well,
Tuck
he's
is
going to
coming in at $95 million, and that's about it.
right. That's it. I mean, he's going to be there for a while because I think that contract. I don't know if the contract has been released, but I think it's guaranteed from what the noise is.
They haven't.
So-
They're in the middle. This is I haven't seen it. The lawsuit of the FOIA is supposed to happen like this week. I haven't.
Yeah,
seen
the Free
follow-up
Press, I
on
think,
that.
is the one who has the.
Yeah, I think the lawsuit was
news.
supposed to go to court this
Yeah.
week. I don't know the follow-up. A strategy question. We got this question from Jacob, and I was going to ask you guys this question, a similar question anyway, because we saw this last year. Obviously, we saw Cade throw the ball a bunch. Do you believe the playbook will open for JJ to throw the ball more at the beginning of the game, or are we going to run the ball until MSU adjusts?
Well, I don't think MSU is going to come out expecting Michigan to throw a lot. I think they're going to be focused on the run from the drop. And, you know, they came out throwing against Indiana. They came out throwing against Penn State. You know, I think the thing to do on Michigan's first couple of drives is to throw the ball around, because you're at home. You have McCarthy, who is super accurate underneath. You know, he had a couple hiccups on screen passes this year, but what stood out about them is like that just doesn't happen. He's completing like 80% of his passes, and this is not a secondary that's going to be able to keep up with Michigan's receivers. So I feel like you just give them some simple stuff, some hitches, some screens and whatnot, if they give that to you by formation, and just sort of establish the fact that you can throw the ball, and then you start working in the run game. I would focus at the worst part of this defense, and that is their secondary, which is for the second consecutive year a complete disaster.
Yeah, the Michigan State also the secondary, it doesn't tackle well. And Michigan has wide receivers who run well after they catch the ball. Their running backs obviously are terrific in space. So aside from their coverage abilities, and my guess is that Michigan State is gonna try and take away the run early. They are gonna bring safeties down. I don't see them sitting back in cover two. That's for sure. You know, I don't know what you think, but I think that's highly unlikely.
Yeah, I mean,
guys, I just want to throw this in to add to it. We had Stephen Brooks on. Alejandro's talking to him. He covers Michigan State for 247. He talked about issues that their linebackers have in coverage. Doesn't Michigan have like the right weapons to take advantage of linebackers that struggle in coverage too?
Well, I mean, that's something that they did really well against Penn State, right? Is that they used play action to suck those guys up and hit behind them, and they got to avoid two of the best quarterbacks in the conference. Now, do you need to avoid any of Michigan State's quarterbacks? No. So I'm just going to go over their pass defense against Power 5 teams. 9.9 yards an attempt, 397 yards against Washington, 10.3, 268 against Minnesota, 7.7, 314 against Maryland, 13.5 yards per pass attempt, 82% completions to CJ Stroud, and then the Mertzening, where you get the MAC quarterback playing MAC offense, and they managed to hold them to 5.5. Michigan is not Wisconsin in the passing game. So if they just open the ball, if they just open it up, they're going to get yards, and they're going to be able to consistently move the ball. And then once you're focused on getting after McCarthy in the passing game, that's when you hit him with Corum and Edwards.
Yeah, I tend to agree that I think they need to be balanced right from the get-go and not just try and pound it at them. So I'm sorry, Seth, go ahead.
No, I'm just about the problem that Michigan State had at the linebacker level that is what they're fixing when they move Jacoby Windman back there. He's better at that than Ben Van Sumeren, who was a disaster. And that was where a lot of teams were hitting them. But they were doing that because they're playing a soft cover 3 is what they are. This is not D'Antonio's quarters team. It's like the polar opposite of that. The way they have to play is they have to put those cornerbacks in the parking lot because they're just going to get beat. I mean, they got Amir Speed, who is the most ironic name in the conference. That he's a big long cornerback, but as soon as someone gets by him, they're by him by yards. Angelo Gross is the safety they brought back from last year. That guy's going against Roman Wilson or Ronnie Bell. Charles Brantley. I mean, they're throwing Dylan Tatum out there, the true freshman from West Bloomfield that Michigan kind of recruited before. And then Xavier Henderson is, a good player against the run, But you saw last year that run, that the catch and run by Andrell Anthony, he just put yards on him in like 3 paces. So that was that's the secondary they got. They haven't gotten any better than last year. And last year, Cade McNamara put up, 350 yards and maybe left another 200 yards on the table. So if we've had an upgrade in the quarterback position since then, if we have all these guys going out there, unless the passing game falls off a cliff, they should be able to throw the ball against these guys.
All right, guys. Before we wrap up the football conversation, any other final thoughts on this game, on the actual football side of it? Because it seems like we've covered a lot of it.
How much do you think a Tuck NFT is going for these days? I think I could probably get one. I could buy like the mall, and I could have
the market corner.
Right, so one last question. So the last game Michigan played, Brad Robbins didn't punt, and obviously they just came off a bye week. So will Brad Robbins go 3 Saturdays without a punt?
No, but it's going to be close.
But it's going to be close. Good answer, Brian. So I think I don't need to ask you guys what your predictions and your scores are, because I think that's 3 Michigan fairly comfortably from all 3 of you guys. Brian, you give a large disparity, but Craig?
Yeah, I think the spread's about right. I think Michigan will win by about 20, 24 in there.
Seth?
I've been saying 42-27 all year, and I kind of want to keep the bit, but I can't imagine Michigan State scoring 27.
It's a lot of points. All right,
it's a lot of chucks.
I want to keep this on a football conversation as we continue here with the MGoBlog Roundtable on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket online at WTK.com. Did you see the clarification from the NCAA yesterday about NIL rules and regulations? The big takeaway for me was that they said they basically legalized collectives is what the ruling was. So apparently all is fair, and collectives are not going to be reeled back in as we probably expected they wouldn't. But collectives were not the initial plan of NIL, but here we are.
I mean, whatever the NCAA says about NIL, it's like, you know, you got a tank and there's an old woman with a broom, and the old woman is hitting the tank with the broom, and she's like, "Hey, quit it." That's what the NCAA is now. It's an old woman with a broom trying to tell people not to do stuff. And it's like, does Miami care? No. Does A&M care? Well, they should maybe, but they don't. Does Alabama care? No. It's irrelevant. Everything the NCAA does is irrelevant. They can't do anything.
The only relevance is that, you know, anytime they make a rule, all the schools that follow the rules are like, "Oh, that's not fair. The other schools get to do that now."
Well, if that's on you at this point.
And what Sam and I talked about this morning, this kind of takes away, if you thought collectives were like a gray area in the NIL game, or you were towing a line or what it might be, and you didn't want to cross into that, this kind of erases that, because there's no more gray area. When they say schools can tell their donors to donate to the collectives, they're like, yeah, collectives are fine. You can go do what you want.
The collectives thing was going to happen because every school was doing it. Even Michigan was doing it. So the collectives thing was not going to be an issue, because the NCAA was going to have to tell literally every single school that you have to shut down a program that you've already put together. The things that matter in this, there are 2 of them. One, the schools can't negotiate deals on behalf of their students. That was a question because couple teams like A&M were doing it and Alabama was not doing it. So that's why it's a question, right? Like if there's only a few schools doing it, and I think that they probably came down, I mean, that's defensible, right? Like the schools can't, because otherwise then it's not really what NIL is. It's just flat out paying the players. The other thing was really dumb. And this is the one that bothers me, and I think that they might have to look at this again really soon, is the schools can't provide free services like contract review, tax preparation, graphic designers, or anything. Now, there are carve-outs in there, so if you go into legal language, there are carve-outs, so if you provide the same thing for all of your student body, then you can make a case that, like, oh, we have student legal services. So because we have student legal services, then we can provide legal services to these guys for free. And I think that might just be the workaround for that rule, because the rule, as it's stated, is incredibly dumb. Basically, they're saying the schools can't educate or assist these these players from, like, getting screwed, right? Like they're not allowed to like step in and be like, oh, let me look at that contract. These are people who have to a degree their best interests in heart, at least to that level, right? And like having them saying you can't do that. Why does that? Who's that hurting?
Well, at this point, I tend to agree with Brian that I mean, there really aren't any rules as far as I can tell. I don't see the NCAA quote enforcing anything by and large. I mean, schools are seemingly paying players up front. Aside from NIL, they're just handing out cash.
That's what NIL is.
Well, no, NIL is a little different than pay for play.
Yes.
Or in its original intent,
its
different.
original intent was like, please stop suing us.
Well, that could be true too.
There was literally no intent. They didn't even make a rule. They just got deadlined by a bunch of state laws, and they were like, do whatever. Just please stop suing us. So to talk about the intent of the NCAA in this matter is completely beside the point.
Well,
their only intent is to keep the gravy train running as long as possible.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that one. But I think from a fan consciousness, let me put it that way, which might have been naive. The idea was if you're a student athlete, you can use your name, image, and likeness to make money, and that wasn't a problem. But that isn't what's happened. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it isn't what happened, when it wasn't the original fan consciousness, at least. But yeah, I mean, you're probably right. They're just saying don't sue us, and it's cowboy days are back.
Brian, when was the last time the NCAA made a decision that was, or a ruling or whatever, that was not a CYA, a cover your, what decision? It seems like every decision they've made for like decades now is to just cover their.
Well, I mean, it's ever since the Board of Regents versus Oklahoma, where they're getting sued because they're allowing one game to be televised a week. It's just been a rearguard action about all the stuff that they want to ban. And like,
it's about 40 years now.
Yeah. Does anyone really care about that at the NCAA at this point? No, I don't care. There's no possible way any of those people care about anything except the bottom line. And they don't like the way things are going, because they are right, is that more money is going to the players than is going to, than it has been in the past. There's a finite pool of money, but I don't see why anyone should care about that anymore. Like, are they going to come down on any of these schools? Like, they have an FBI investigation for people doing a bunch of stuff that was not legal at the time. And what LSU got, nothing, right? They got absolutely nothing. So what's going to happen with Kansas? Same thing. So if at this point you're like, oh, we got to follow the rules, like, there are no rules. They're guidelines, but that's not a rule. And like, I don't know. It's just
people don't quite understand what the NCAA is, because they're used to, a commissioner structure like they would have in a pro league, where like the commissioner of Major League Baseball can come down and say, okay, if you break these rules, you can't play, or you're going to be fined this much. That's not how the NCAA works. This is an organization built out of the presidents, right? It was built to be like a 1-year meeting where they got together and like, okay, let's fix the rules. It's an agreement between the presidents of the universities. So when you look at what's their strategy, or what are they trying to do, the presidents right now, all they care about is getting donations, and all they care, the football program gets them donations. They want to have good football programs. They're not interested in, maintaining the academic structure of college football. Like they haven't cared about that for, like Brian said, for 40 years, probably a lot longer. You could argue for 100 years, they haven't really cared about that. So the NCAA has always been kind of fake, and it's just always been this, okay, if we all pretend to follow the rules, then we can all make more money and keep the prices down with players. That's what it's always been about. What happens lately is that they got way too greedy in the last 30 years about how much money is going to the administrators and how much money the schools are going to take. The ads went way up. The conferences shifted just because of money, just for money issues. All these decisions are happening right around the players, and they're watching it happen. So when your coach is, driving a worse car than you are, it's not a huge deal to you that like they have these rules. It's not in your face all the time. When you're watching a $1 billion entertainment industry going on around you and you're not participating, it's so ridiculously galling that you have to say something. And that's what happened. They had this run, they're making so much money, and the players are sitting and watching it, and they knew that they needed to share. It was always a house of cards. It fell down.
Fell down on our time to have conversations about it. Those are going to continue as more guidelines will come out and more rules and regulations. As I know, Santa Ono talked to M Live about it, that they're still waiting for, state and federal laws to also come and play and see if anything else changes on it. Another thing for you guys, we continue here on the MGoBlog Roundtable on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket online at WTK.com. Did you guys see Hunter doing his gymnastics routine, getting ready for basketball season on Twitter yesterday? I'm glad he didn't get hurt.
Can't say I did.
So
I missed this one. You'll have to tell us.
So the basketball team tweeted out he had a member of the women's gymnastics team took him out into a few apparatus to the bars. Did some spinning. He did a couple of jumps. It's his new basketball training. I'm surprised you guys missed that video yesterday. After it was really funny.
It seems dangerous for a 7'1" guy to be.
I thought so. He did ask for a higher beam or a higher bar for the uneven bars. He did not actually do a full spin all the way around. They did show him how to jump into a pit of fluffy balls. But we are right around the corner. Got me thinking, obviously, as media day was recently, and then women's basketball's media day was a couple days ago. We're a week and change away from the first basketball games. So, Craig, we're not that far away. I know you've been paying pretty close attention. I don't know if you heard anything from the super duper secret scrimmage that Phil Martelli told us that he couldn't talk about and then talked about anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because Phil said that he wasn't allowed to talk about it, but then he said we played really good defense and we couldn't shoot the ball. So, I mean, that's what I heard at least, and I don't know if that's an NCAA violation or not. Probably not. But in any event, I think they played at Florida, which is a little unusual. Oh, Florida State, because usually they play Kent State or Bowling Green or U of D or something more Akron, something a little more local. The Big Ten to me is fascinating this year in basketball because every single team is just so unsettled. I looked at Illinois
seems
to be the generalized favorite in the conference this year.
No, Indiana is probably
Sports Illustrated had it as Illinois. Other people might have had it as Indiana. But I'm looking at both those teams and saying, why? If you look at Illinois, they lost Kofi, Frazier, Plummer, DeMonte Williams, Curbelo, and Grandison. Essentially their whole team. They got a couple of transfer guys in, but that are good. Shannon. And they have Coleman Hawkins, and they got Matthew Meyer from Baylor, who's a good player. But you're still putting together, a team with a freshman point guard, Sky Clark, 3 guys who haven't ever played together before. And, at Indiana, you got Jackson Davis, who everyone agrees is a good player. But the rest of that team looks, who do you like? Xavier Johnson? Miller Kopp, Michael Dewar, who moves like a post. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, that's all right. Go ahead.
I think that like a lot of Big Ten basketball seasons, it's a turnover year. So right now we're focusing on the transfers because those are the guys we have stats for. And we're focusing on returning starters because those are the guys we have stats for. There's a lot of freshmen in the league last year. And some of those guys are going to get a lot better. Just, when that's what happens. Guys pop, right? So you'll not hear about a guy for a couple of years in basketball and all of a sudden he's really good. And we've gone around the league and tried to find who's everyone's Kobe Buffkin, right? Like a guy that the team, on the ground, we're all expecting him to start. We're all expecting him to be pretty good. We saw some flashes last year. Nobody who wasn't paying very close attention to Michigan has Kobe Buffkin on their radar right now. A lot of them are just kind of slotting, Michigan's transfers into they're slotting Baker in at the 2 on other sites. Mm-hmm. So, there's guys like Jordan Geronimo on Indiana who might come through. Wisconsin, I don't even know their names, but there's probably someone who's going to be young. With Ohio State's full of freshmen. Like one of those guys might come out good, and that's the story that we're missing. There are people that we don't know the names of or have heard a couple times who might pop.
Well, I think that's fair. But that's the point also, is that you're sort of throwing darts out there. I mean, Ohio State loses Liddell, Branham, Kyle Young, Wheeler, Aarons, and the famed Joey Brunk, and that's their team. So they're basically starting all over. And certainly it's true that there may be young guys who start to break out, but that's true at every single team in the conference. And so to me, it's why it looks so completely unsettled, because it is unclear, who will break out, who might break out. Will Kobe Buffkin have a good year? I sure hope so.
I see that Indiana's. You mentioned that Indiana's the top most people, like they're the top of the highest ranked team in both the
First or
preseason polls, that
second.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But can someone explain to me why tell me why I should not think that Trace Jackson Davis is just an enigma? Like, people love him, but I don't see him come up huge in big games. He seems to disappear at times. I don't see what maybe other people are seeing. They keep, preseason player of the year caliber. He's a good player, but people are calling him maybe, one of the best players in America, things like that. I think he's more of an enigma than anything else.
I don't think he's necessarily an enigma. I think what he is he's a limited offensive player who struggled with size. So you give him a team that doesn't really put up a whole lot of defensive stop signs and he'll go off. But, he's been a guy who I think when he goes up against Hunter Dickinson, usually that doesn't go very well for him because he's just a guy who hasn't been able to put it all together. And I mean, he is coming off a year where he vastly increased his 2-point shooting. He's got a solid block rate. He's a guy who is a reliable player. He's an excellent player, but I don't understand how you can look at Jackson Davis and Hunter Dickinson and be like, okay, Trace Jackson Davis is the guy who's the All-American. Like, really? I think he's a good player, but I'll tell you one thing is that Indiana is not winning this conference. Like,
I kind of agree with that. I mean, I look at that at this team and I say, what about this as conference champion? In nothing, as far as I can tell. Now, maybe I'll be wrong. I'm wrong about a lot of stuff, but
it's absolutely wild. Indiana they weren't 500. They were 9-11 in the league, and I'm struggling to think of any team that has ever been projected to win the Big Ten that didn't even go 500 the previous year. Like they finished 9th in the league. And now it's like everybody else has lost so much that they're going to win. I can't see that happening.
Yeah. Is there a team that either of you guys think might be undervalued at this point, or you have a guess might be undervalued?
Purdue.
Yeah, that's mine too.
I mean, well, you can also make a case for Rutgers because they returned not everybody.
What?
Well, they did not Ron Harper.
They lost Ron Harper and Geo Baker.
So not everybody.
So like
they returned a majority of their starts.
Yeah,
which is both more than you can say for like every other Big Ten contender.
Yeah, but they're returning like Paul McCahey and Caleb McConnell. Like they have huge questions about who's going to take a tough shot for them. And like, I mean, they got Omaruyi back, and he's a solid player, but I don't know how they're going to generate offense. Like Ohio State doesn't look like a whole lot. I mean, honestly, like if you're asking me for teams that I think are undervalued in the preseason, it's probably Illinois and Michigan. Like Illinois has huge roster turnover, but they really hit the portal hard, and I think Terrence Shannon's going to be a dude. Their only issue is like, what are they going to do at center? Because it doesn't really seem like they have a good answer there. But they have a lot of talent up and down the rest of that roster. And then Michigan probably has the best player in the league.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, Illinois, I'm not sure if Hawkins is really a center.
No, he's not.
And outside of him, I don't know what they've got to play that spot. I also don't know what they have at point guard. I mean, they have a kid who's highly recruited, but he's a freshman, Sky Clark. And so, I'm not sure. I mean, college basketball is really driven by the backcourts, and I'm not sure I see it there. Uh, it could be. Uh, and it's sort of the same in Indiana. I look at their backcourt and I go, what? And but Purdue, I do like. I mean, one, because I think they're probably coached as well as anybody in the Big Ten, or maybe better. And I do like Caleb First and Gillis and Ethan Morton. I think are undervalued players, and they still have Edie. Again, and
They bring
Isaiah
back, is it Brandon Jennings? They had a guy hurt
Newman,
last year.
Brandon Newman, you mean?
Brandon Newman.
Yeah, and
Jennings.
Newman's back. I think he is, and I think Isaiah Thompson's back. So, and they have Fletcher Lawyer, the better of the Lawyer brothers. So,
Yeah, but I mean, their issue is that they don't have anything that even looks like a point guard.
well, yeah, I that's the problem. I mean, unless it's Isaiah Thompson, who's sort of a point guard, but yeah, I hear you.
Thompson's gone. Thompson's gone. They brought in a Utah
okay.
transfer, David Jenkins, who
Okay.
is not. I mean, unless Painter saw something in him that Utah never did. I mean,
Well, the crazy thing about Jenkins is this is going to be the fourth school he plays for. He started at South Dakota State. He transferred to UNLV. He transferred to Utah. And at none of these places did he ever have an assist rate that looks like a point guard. Like, he scraped above 10 for one season at UNLV. And he's a guy who, once he got to a power conference level, just did not shoot the ball inside the arc pretty much at all. So his profile looks like just a shooter at the high major level. And Painter is a guy who gets tons of mileage out of those guys.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really address the fact that they don't have a guy like Ivy to initiate their offense. Now, if there's one team in the Big Ten that has an offensive system and the quality coaching that you need to mitigate that, it's Purdue. But it is just something where it's like, who on this team is even going to bring the dang ball up? How are they going to deal with ball pressure? Is anyone going to be able to enter the post to Edie? I mean, yes, I withdraw that. Entering the post to Edie is the easiest task in the Big Ten this year.
Can somebody put the ball 9 feet in the air?
Right. But I mean, that's really their open question. And then, Iowa, Chris Murray's probably going to be Keegan 2.0. They're not going to play any defense. They're going to be themselves. And then Michigan State entering this season with functionally 9 scholarship players. They put a Who-Dat from the JV team on scholarship this year. And what are they going to do at center? Matty Sissoko is going to be a good rebounder for about 6 minutes a game before he fouls out. And you got a true freshman, 2 different true freshmen, and Joey Hauser as your options. And it's just
yeah, Hauser's not a center. I mean, he's closer to a 3 than he is a 4.
Well, but
and
Michigan State has played him at the 5
I know.
periodically since he transferred, and they're going to have to again this year.
Yeah,
and
they don't have a choice.
We've seen what that looks like against legitimate posts. I mean, the thing is that how many legit posts are in this league anymore? You got
Edie.
Jackson Davis, you got Edie, you got Dickinson,
Hunter.
Yeah.
and then Omarui, I think he's going to count. But Zed Key,
It's a drop off from the last few years.
Yeah, and you're right. The centers in the league are, I guess you got Robbie Barron at Northwestern.
Well, Northwestern had kids
They're
transferred
so
to Duke and UNC this offseason.
Yeah,
right.
Robbie Barron's not really a center. They're going to be playing.
We've talked all we need to talk about Northwestern basketball for the next 10 years.
Probably.
What about Chase Audige, your boy? I mean, isn't he going to have his breakout year, Brian?
Well, I saw an article that was with Pete Nance transferring to UNC, is it time for Chase Audige to take the mantle? And that's what I shorted all my Chris Collins stock.
Yes.
I bought every share of Chris Collins and sold it immediately.
build the whole that should have been my hot take for the basketball thing, is to make the whole offense out of Chase Audige, because his ridiculously low, what is it, a 96 O rating? That's better than the rest of the team. So just do it. Just have Chase Audige do ridiculous things, and that could be your offense.
The most
Geo
consensus
Baker
thing in Big Ten basketball is the bottom, right? Everyone just kind of knows who the bottom 2 or 3 teams are going to be. That's probably the most consensus in the Big Ten when it comes to basketball this year. And Northwestern will be right there in that conversation.
Yeah, Northwestern, the same old cast of characters.
Yeah, Northwestern, Nebraska, Penn State. There you go. Bottom of the league, like normal, right?
Although Minnesota lost
Minnesota's
scores.
pretty bad too. So bottom 4. There you go. There's your Wednesday games at the Big Ten tournament. Guys, appreciate it as always. Any final thoughts on Michigan State before we get out of here? Any shots you want to take at Michigan State, Brian, before you get out of here? You had a pretty good one before the show, or the beginning of the show.
Take my shots once there's shots to take.
Gotcha. All right. Well, guys, we are going to get out of here. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, Ann Arbor, a Cumulus.